Hi, folks. Sorry about the interruption. A little technical difficulties. Uh, this is the New York and Oswego Midlands Middletown Wickham Avenue station. This was the original station in Middletown, New York. And when the Ontario and Western took over the property, they built a new brick station at Wickham Avenue. This is seen from the postcard. Uh, this bay window is the dispatcher's office. Notice between the towers, there's basically only a single story. At the time, the Ontario Western's main office was located on 42nd Street in Manhattan. During the bankruptcy, the trustee moved the general offices from New York City to Middletown. To accommodate that, a two-story section was built between the two towers. And here's the dispatcher's bay window, just for you to keep it in picture. One of the interesting survivors was this train order signal that was there for 20 years after the railroad. Here's the 401, which was the USRA Light Mountain at Middletown Station. Middletown, the 405 in the Mountaineer paint scheme. The railroad didn't have much in the way of available cash, so they weren't going to get a nice, fancy, streamlined train. But they did hire Otto Cooler to do a low-budget job, and basically he put a plate underneath underneath the boiler with the logo, put a side along the walkways, painted most of the trim pieces maroon and gave it orange trim, like you see on the tender. The conductors were given orange uniforms with maroon ties and orange shirts. Didn't last long because the railroad had a hard time keeping the rolling stock together in one unit. And here's the 502, one of the F3s at Middletown Station circa 1953. This would be the last year of passenger service on the New York, Ontario, and Western. Notice by this point, the steel passenger cars have been sold out. These are sold off. These are two Central Railroad of New Jersey passenger cars, which were trip leased for the day. Here's the 501 and one of the two home-built steam heater cars. Originally, it was thought they were going to continue year-round passenger service, so they built two heater cars because the F3s didn't have steam heat. These were built on old locomotive tenders. They lasted till the end of the railroad, but they were rarely used because they basically went to summer-only passenger service shortly after they were built. Here's the 803 coming by Middletown and the Middletown Express House. Notice the O&W symbol there on the in the brickwork. Milk car 1034 of Middletown, 1946. Only it's not holding milk. As the trustee was going through all the paperwork in the general offices, he decided some of it was no longer needed. So they brought it out to this milk car, and filled the milk car to the brim. They then moved it up to the shops, set it on fire, and that took care of the scrapping of it. They then brought another milk car down here and repeated the process all over again. The milk traffic was an important revenue source on the New York, Ontario, and Western. On the Southern Division, almost every station had a creamery, milk platform, or other dairy-related industry. This traffic all went away with a 1953 change in New York State marketing laws. And here's the 405 north of Middletown Station approaching the shops. This is a 1938 fan trip, which we'll talk about later. But you can see the coaling facility ahead and the erecting shop over here. Here's the Middletown Yardmaster's office in 1974. And Inspection Engine 26 in the Middletown Yard. Beautiful thing, beautiful thing. Some of the acquaintances of mine have modeled this using the the 440 General as a starting point. Here's a bull moose at Middletown. That's a big 210-2 pusher engine. The Santa Fe had some locomotives, also nicknamed bull moose. They were all acquired in 1916 when Teddy Roosevelt was running on the Bull Moose Party for a third term as president. Here's the 272, a rather delicate looking 260, and GE 44 tonner 101 in the later paint scheme. Note the multiple unit receptacle. The 5 original 44 tonners were delivered without multiple units, and they found they needed to to run 2 of them together for a local freight, so they gave the 101 and 105 multiple unit equipment. A Middletown locomotive celebrity, Middletown and Unionville 6. This was from what became the Middletown in New Jersey, and it's a former New York, Ontario, and Western 440. Business car 30 in Middletown. This car still survives in a museum in Franklin, New York. Middletown Erecting Shop in 1974. November 11th, 2020, the Middletown shops burned. One final view of the shops as we head north. A view of the Dodge coal storage units, which are over here in Middletown. Middletown Coal Storage Yard on a postcard. Well, the weird thing is, I thought this was always a weird subject for a postcard till a coworker of mine got hurt when she was in Little Rock, Arkansas, and she sent us all a postcard of the emergency room entrance. The New York, Ontario, and Western got its first taste of revenue from coal, transporting it from Sydney to Oswego for the D&H. The New York, Ontario, and Western then built the Scranton Division to tap the anthracite fields, completing it in June 1890. The Southern Division was rebuilt to handle this traffic flow. Coal storage facilities were built at Cadocia and Middletown. 2 coal piers at Weehawken, 1 at Cornwall, and an additional 1 at Oswego were added to transfer coal to marine vessels. There was an earlier coal trestle in Oswego already, but that was for the exclusive use of the Delaware and Hudson. A marine division was created to transport New York and Ontario Western coal to points as far away as Portland, Maine. A retail coal yard with a siding was established in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Coal traffic held up well until the 1940s. As the decade began, 20 P-Class 280s were assigned to Mayfield Yard near Carbondale, Pennsylvania for the mine service. By the end of the decade, only 3 NW2s were at Mayfield, and they also switched the yard. The last big movement of coal was under contract to the U.S. government for the Marshall Plan after World War II. And Heavy Mountain 459 north of Middletown. This is a USRA Heavy Mountain, very similar to a New York Central design. And RF Tower at Crawford Junction. The Erie goes off to the right. The New York, Ontario, Western goes straight ahead. This is the end of the Erie trackage rights that we've been traveling over since Middletown Main Street. The North Portal of Highview Tunnel in 1974. Tool shed at Highview Tunnel. Highview Station, 1974. At this point, it was pretty much a overgrown chicken coop. Since that day, it's been acquired by a family. They've rehabilitated it, cut the grass. The place looks great, and there's a ticket wicket in the living room, commemorating the building's heritage. The 405 at Speed near Mamakating. This is the Mountaineer. Mamakating Station, which is now a VFW post. Summitville, the 225, which is the 460 on the right, is on the Kingston branch. A Y2 pusher is on the main. During summer Sundays, Saturdays, there was a shuttle train between Summitville and a couple of the stations on the Kingston branch. Second 14 at Summitville tank on a Port Jervis train. Very interesting, very light looking 440 Camelbacks. Summitville Station in 1974. There was an attempt to build a tourist railroad here, but it failed, and the guy got so pissed he donated the building to the local fire department for a live burn exercise. The 228 and train at Summitville. Woodridge Station in its original guise as a railroad station. Woodbridge, relocated and rebuilt. The hamburgers weren't bad at the Art Gang Charboil. Unfortunately, it's been torn down and there's now a gas station at this location. Fallsburg Station, rebuilt. It's now the Fallsburg Town Hall. And where you see this sidewalk here, that's approximately where the track was. Luzon Station in Hurleyville. Ferndale Trestle with an E-Class locomotive. The 822, which is an F3 leading a freight off of the Ferndale Trestle. Ferndale Trestle, half of it has been torched away for scrap. Remember I talked about the self-cannibalization? Ferndale Trestle, only some footings remain. Ferndale Station is still standing, or at least a part of it. The 111 switching at Delaware and Hudson wood hopper by the Liberty contract less than carload lot facility. The Ontario and Western consolidated all its less than carload lot freight in this building in Liberty, which was actually owned by a trucking company. The trucking company actually made the deliveries to the Catskills and served a big area of New York State. Liberty on a busy day post World War I. The 807 and one other FT at Liberty. Liberty Station, 1974. In 1976, the fry cook in the tavern that was located inside forgot to turn off the French fry machine. You know what happened. The 405 at Liberty, shorn of its decorations. Okay, this is the Hotel Wawanda near Liberty, New York. And notice it says Rivanna Park, Liberty, New York. There's a reason for that. The summer resort industry was one of the two major traffic flows on the New York, Ontario Western, the other being the transport of coal. In the days before air conditioning, it was a practice for families to move from the city to the country to escape the summer heat. The father would come up on the weekends. Now, why did the hotel not want to be recognized as being in Liberty? Liberty, New York became a center of tuberculosis sanitariums. If you were suffering from the disease, you went up there, checked into one of the sanitariums, and basically you slept on a platform out in the middle of the air. You know, the fresh air was going to cure you. It was before they invented antibiotics. And as a result, Liberty got a reputation. You don't want to go there because you'll catch a disease. Young's Gap on the north side, and there's Mr. Taylor. R.E. Wright had the third trick. This was the Young's Gap train order office. And there was a train order office here because it was the top of the pusher grade from Summitville. Here's Parksville Station. Parksville Station is a fascinating point of view. It's because, well, let's get into it. On this end of the building is the waiting room. The station agent's office is in the middle, and also the telegraph office is in the middle. The baggage room, which doubles as a freight house, if you will, is here in the distance, and there is a platform to load from a baggage car. Upstairs was a two-room apartment for the station agent and his family. Now, the station agent's wife could make extra money because in the basement there was two one-room apartments. The Second and third trick telegraphers lived in the basement, the agent having the first trick. So the station agent's wife could make money serving meals to the telegraphers who lived in the basement. And it was also where the community got all their information. Today you go here, not only is the Parksville station gone, so is Parksville. That's a former Erie caboose at Livingston Manor, and it's one of the first all steel cabooses built for the Erie. The New York and Oswego Midland Livingston Manor station still survives. It's been moved a couple of blocks away, and a lean-to shed has been put on the back of it. Here's the Heavy Mountain 456 at Livingston Manor awaiting a pusher assignment. Livingston Manor Freight House, and of course the ever popular coal pocket or coal silo. Just about every community had them, whether you're on the Ontario Western, the Long Island Railroad, or the Santa Fe. Here's FT's on the passenger train near Roscoe. Notice we've got New York Central coaches on the train today. And Roscoe with the 502 on the train. This is one of the F3s purchased specifically for passenger service. And looking at the lettering spacing, it looks like we've got a Central Railroad of New Jersey coach followed by two New York Central coaches in the consist of the train. Roscoe on May 29th, 1949. And obviously it's a warm day because look at how this trainman is dressed. But here behind the locomotive is a heater car. Why is that in the consist? Some people theorize it was a test run because it had just been turned out of the shops. Trout fishing in the Beaver Kill near Roscoe, New York. This area of New York State is famous for the trout fishing. The state of New York took pride in stocking the streams that fed into the East Branch of the Delaware River with trout each year, a practice that continues to this day, but they don't transport the trout by rail car anymore. The New York, Ontario Western was always quick to advertise that it served this area as it extended the summer season for rail travel. Cooks Falls, don't have a picture of it, but a family has built a summer cabin on the foundation of the former water tank that was here. Yes, the building is circular. East Branch. Now, East Branch was a junction with the Delaware and Northern Railroad. Let's go back in history. The O&W milk train is on the left, and on the right, the Delaware Northern Red Heifer meets the New York, Ontario Western. The Delaware Northern was abandoned because New York City wanted to build a reservoir that would flood most of the rail line. Funny thing is, the New York City did not buy the railroad. They went out and they bought the stock for the railroad, so they became 100% shareholder, and then they just told the people we're shutting down. The area north of Roscoe was known for its wood chemical plants. The wood chemical industry burned wood in retorts and extracted chemicals from the smoke. This was an important revenue source for the New York, Ontario Western, as was the incompatible hotels and trout fishing in the same area. Yeah, the wood chemical industry were terrible polluters, and carcinogenic issues were also arose. Fisher's Eddy Bridge collapsed in 1897 with an empty coal train. Sorry, the photograph you saw previously inspired a book. David Mazurik is a bridge engineer working for the Coast Guard, and he analyzes why bridges collapse. Fascinating technical book. The rebuilt Fisher's Eddy Bridge now carries a highway. Here's the 807 entering Hawks Nest Tunnel. The 821 on Train 9 arriving in Kedosia. The 455 with the snowplow pilot at the Kedosia Coaling Tower. For those not familiar with Kedosia, it's uphill from Hancock, New York. Kedosia Yard, circa 1920. And we see the tank car here. This tank car was wood lined, and it was used to transport vinegar to a mayonnaise plant down on the Scranton branch, which is this trackage over here. The 408 leads a southbound across the Delaware River Bridge on the Scranton Division, and the 352 pushing on that southbound. And the Delaware River Bridge was demolished circa 1978. The New York end remained with a restaurant located in it. I'm standing here in the Pennsylvania bank of the Delaware River. The second 802 and FT passing Linden Street in Scranton, Pennsylvania, October 4th, 1953, and a photo taken by that well-known traction enthusiast Ed Miller. That's the Delaware and Hudson passenger station above the train. Back to Kedosia, late 1950s. Kedosia Station, after the railroad abandoned, it became a tavern, and then years later it became a floral shop. The Freight House was a used car dealer for a while. Interesting used car dealer because he also dealt in used fire trucks. Today it's part of the floral business. Here's the 120 switching train 9 in Kedosia. Apex Station from a postcard. The local taxi service you see is standing by, ready to take you anywhere. And the Mountain Express near Granton sidings above Apex. This wasn't a station, but it was a complex of a few sidings. A postcard view of Beerston Station and Creamery with a vintage automobile there. Not quite sure what type of car it is, so we won't even guess. Walton Baggage Room. This is the only part of the Walton Station that survives, and it's an apartment. Guy lives in has a living room on the first floor and has a bedroom down below, and the heating plant and cooling plant is off to the right. Here's the 242 at Walton Station, and to the right of the locomotive you can see the former baggage room. Walton Freight House. In the early 70s, it was a plumbing supply shop. Today, it's a gym. And the Sydney Freight House was joint with the Delaware and Hudson. I was on my way home at dusk, grabbed a quick picture saying, oh, I'll get back there. Yeah, and somebody burned the damn building down. Here's another view of the joint Sydney Freight House, August 1957. Notice the Railway Express Agency. Silver roof, dark green vehicles with big ads on the side. Have you modeled them? The 245 at Sydney, rebuilt to Class U1, but it's still a 260. Maywood, or Sydney, located Sydney Center, New York, was the site of a horseshoe curve on trestles. Yeah, Pennsylvania wasn't the only railroad with a horseshoe curve. A double-headed passenger extra approaching the Maywood station. That's this building right here. Sorry for the bad quality image. The train is being pulled by double-head camelbacks. It had run from Weehawken to Summitville behind the 405. We saw it at Middletown, if you remember. The two camelbacks to Sydney, and then the passengers changed to a D&H train to Albany with the last leg to New York City on the New York Central. The cost was $5 in 1938. Here's Maywood, the Sydney Center station, Maywood Station in Sydney Center. It's been renovated into a museum now. Lions Brook Trestle. Norwich with Camelback 440 number 12 at the station. Norwich Station. Let's join the Buffalo Division of the Railway Enthusiasts for a ride from Oneida to Sydney. That's the Utica Division tracks to the right. The track to the left goes to a connection with the New York West Shore and Buffalo branch to Syracuse. In early 1957, the bankruptcy court ordered the New York, Ontario, and Western to be shut down as of April 1st, 1957. No successful plan of reorganization had been developed during the 20 years of bankruptcy. The Old and Weary was embargoed circa March 15, 1957. That meant that no shipments could be way-billed after that date for interchange or delivery by the New York, Ontario, and Western. Goods in transit on that day could continue in, goods could still be shipped out. The last train. March 27, 1957, the 805 near Apex. The 805 in its train near Bearston. Northfield Tunnel as the 805 approaches, March 27, 1957. 805 crossing the Delaware and Hudson in Sydney. Seemed like a good place to have the Piper's Lament. 3:25 a.m., March 28, 1957. Train WN9 terminates in Middletown, ending operations south of Middletown. Normally, WN9 would have gone through to Norwich. 5:50 a.m., extra 803 with the 821 arrives at Mayfield from the Lehigh Valley Railroad at Coxton. Operations south of Mayfield Yard on the Scranton Division are ended. 7:15 a.m., train NE6 departs Mayfield with 803 and 821. When it arrives at Cadosia at 8:35 a.m., the Scranton Division is history. 11:20 a.m., extra 115 arrives at Clinton from Rome with the last Rome branch movement. 11:55 a.m., extra 118 arrives at Walton from Delhi with the last Delhi branch movement. About 12:30 p.m., extra 115 arrives at Pecksport, closing out the Utica Division. Extra 123 departs Monticello at 2:20 p.m. for Port Jervis, arriving there at 3:40 p.m. When it arrives at Summitville at 6:10 p.m., those branches are closed. 3:45 p.m., extra 120 departs Kingston for Middletown, arriving at Summitville at 5:50 p.m., last movement on the Kingston branch. 4:35 p.m. train ON2 with the 805, which left Oswego at 1:33 p.m., departs Oneida. When it arrives at Norwich at 6:05 p.m., the north end becomes history. 7:30 p.m. Erie Extra 427 arrives at Crawford Junction, RF Tower, and clears the New York, Ontario Western in Middletown at 7:45 p.m. The final train order was issued to the conductor and engineer of engine 805. Number 24 was made complete at Norwich at 8:24 p.m. on March 28, 1957. Strange thing is, it's got a bad date on it. It should be the 28th, not the 29th. So I suspect this is something somebody created. Norwich at 9:12 p.m. on March 29, 1957. This will become the last train. That's the 805, which we saw earlier. Extra 805 arrived at Middletown at 3:25 a.m. on March 29, 1957, ending all New York, Ontario Western train operations. At 4:45 a.m., the moon rises on an emptier landscape. A little bit of aftermath. There'd no longer be any light at the end of the tunnel. Sydney in August 1957 after the shutdown. FT 801 after the shutdown at Middletown. The 114 and NW2 in Middletown after the shutdown. 5 cabooses went to the Long Island Railroad. Baggage 170, baggage mail 170 in Bauman Scrapyard in Mayfield. A few years later, the same car continued to molder away in the scrapyard. 3 segments of New York, Ontario Western operated track continued to see trains. Plus, the Erie continued to operate their line up the Pine Bush, which meant they went right by the O&W's former headquarters every other day. Few precious pieces of rolling stock survive: the 116 in upstate New York and the 105 at Steamtown, now owned by the O&W Railway Historical Society. And Business Car 30 and Arcade. As I said earlier, it's now in a museum in Franklin. 4-wheel caboose 8206 up in Delaware County. And a track car in Strasburg, Pennsylvania. And it is still remembered. This is a mural on a fire truck from Liberty, New York. And here's that fire truck. I give you the New York, Ontario Western Railway, January 21st, 1880 to March 29th, 1957. Want to trace the O&W yourself? The O&W Railway Historical Society has a series of guidebooks to track the entire line. I believe if you buy the whole set, it's $95. But if you're an Ontario Western fan, it's a good investment. For a good basic history of the line, and you can see how I've worn mine out. In memory of Arthur F. Buzzy Lubitz. The first musical selection is entitled Land of Hope and Glory and is from the album Portsmouth, recorded by His Majesty's Royal Marines Band Service. The video is from the archives of the Ontario Western Railway Historical Society, with no further crediting currently available. And the second music selection is Piper's Lament. Credit to the Household Division is from the album The Best Bagpipe Moments Ever. Text copyright 2017 by me. Photograph with captions not outlined, copyright various dates by me. No claim of copyright is made for an image or video with an outlined caption. Those copyrights remain with their respective owners. Are there any questions, comments, or constructive criticisms? Thank you for your attention and attendance. Speed, I've reached my last shot.
We have a few questions here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
What major industries did the New York, Ontario, and Western serve?
Well, that was the problem. There were no major industries on the railroad. Once the coal traffic went away, once the weekend the family summer vacation went away, there was little to no traffic, except they built up some overhead traffic. There were a few defense plants in Sydney, but most of that traffic went to the D&H, And Motorola would eventually would in the 50s would build a television factory near Ellenville, but in the 50s, cushioned freight cars hadn't been invented. They would not allow televisions to be shipped by rail.
Wow. Now, without giving your age away, have you been on any of these trains?
I have never ridden the New York Ontario Western.
Okay.
Uh, let's just say when it shut down, I was in kindergarten.
Okay. I've heard that the New York Ontario Western was called the Old Woman. Any truth to that?
The old the nickname "Old Woman" was created by a railfan magazine. Uh, the railfans in the 30s, 40s, and 50s all referred to it as either the O&W, Ontario and Western, or Old and Weary. But the Old Woman was a basically a work of fiction, and the O&W Railway Historical Society really takes a rankle at that term.
The show mentioned that three segments of the O&W track continued in service after the shutdown, but gave no details. Do you
Oh,
have some?
yes, I can. The Majors track section is between Fulton, New York to Oswego, and that was joint with the New York Central system. It eventually passed the Conrail, which overhauled the trackage to allow unit coal trains to serve a power plant in Oswego operated by the New York State Power Authority. Shortly after the track rehab was finished, the plant ceased using coal. The track remains in situ. The Delaware, Lackawanna, and Western acquired the portion of the Scranton division between Scranton and Dixon City to serve the few remaining coal mines in that area. After the Erie-Lackawanna merger, this trackage, which basically paralleled the Erie's Wyoming division, was abandoned. The third segment is a short piece of the Utica division near Utica, which survives today with occasional movements to an industry by the New York Susquehanna and Western. The trackage between Middletown Main Street and the site of RF Tower remains in place and in service. Uh, the track that track was never owned by the O&W, despite going right by their general offices. Erie's Erie trackage, over which the O&W had trackage rights, it's still operated today by the Middletown in New Jersey as a connection to the Norfolk Southern.
Cool. Now, here's the big NMRA question. We are the National Model Railroad Association, right? Do you know,
Yes,
after 68 years being gone, has anyone modeled any of this?
I don't think I'm qualified to really fully answer this question, but I do know of an N gauge layout located in the Los Angeles, California area that I really had a lot of fun operating on. There's a gentleman in South Central Wisconsin who has a Ontario and Western themed layout that I've toured visually, and it looks great. And there's also a gentleman who exhibits regularly at the Springfield show who does a lot of modeling and has a lot of very nice dioramas. And plus, it must be popular because Rapido US is offering the two different versions of the Ontario and Western FTs, and they already did the 44 tonners. And a number of years ago, a brass importer brought in a bunch of Ontario and Western steam locomotives, passenger cars, and cabooses. They weren't the best models, but they're out there.
Were they only used on this railroad?
Uh, those models, yeah, the brass stuff, yeah, the FTs were used everywhere, but the brass models were basically O&W prototypes.
Okay. And what scales do they? HO scale?
Uh, well, everything that I mentioned was is HO scale,
Okay.
except for that the wonderful layout in California that's N scale.
We'll have to track that gentleman down.
Yeah, well, yes, he's president of the Pacific Coast region currently.
Okay. So one last question. If people have more questions, how would they contact you?
Well, the best way is go to the Sunrise Trail Division NMRA's website, Under contacts, go. I'm listed as one of the board members, Edward Kohler, Koehler. Of course, my email address is Edward M. Kohler, Koehler, at nyc.rr.com.
Cool. So please, if you have more questions, make sure to send that email. For the rest of us, thank you very, very much. Ed, that was a lot more than I expected to see about something that's 68 years in the passing. So very insightful. Um, we will see everybody else back here on April 26th, I believe. Again, 5 p.m. New York time. Thank you much for watching. See you soon.
Okay, thank you very much, Speed.